French President Emmanuel Macron said yesterday that Israeli leaders need to more precisely define their goal because the total destruction of Hamas would mean the war will last 10 years. Vice President Kamala Harris said Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. So as Israel resumes its offensive in Gaza, what is its strategy and will it heed America's call to safeguard civilian life? I'm joined by Miri, a retired colonel in the IDF and director of the International Institute for Counterterrorism. Miri, welcome. So if you were, in response to President Macron, to define Israel's strategy, how would you describe it?
Destroying Hamas is very challenging, as he said. But what the Israeli strategy is we're focusing on their military terror capabilities. That's actually something you can break down in a very specific way. You're going after 16 years of building positions, accumulating weapons, building the subterranean arena, and training these different thousands of terrorists. And that's what Israel is doing with the military capability. It goes hand in hand with the diplomacy because of the issue of the hostages. You want to try to get to the hostages. I'll remind that that's part of the picture, but it's most definitely focusing on destroying military capabilities and thinking about that next day of what will come instead.
So if it is focused on destroying those specific military capabilities, presumably these are tunnels, these are passageways, these are weapons caches, shouldn't there be a greater emphasis on sending in IDF special forces rather than what appears to be a kind of more carpet bombing approach? In other words, I realize that, of course, puts IDF forces in harm's way, but isn't that a more precise and tactical way? I mean, this is something the U.S. discovered in Iraq, that you have to send special forces in rather than just bombing the entire neighborhood to smithereens.
So you could say in that sense, Fareed, that what we were doing in the 3 weeks of the ground offensives is what you're talking about, but it isn't only special forces. It's a combination of different type of infantry forces because you need to go in. It's urban area, very densely populated. The first thing that Israel did before we went into the ground operation at all is we were telling civilians, please move, go to the areas that we define to save your lives. You're going into urban areas that are still unhappily filled with civilians. And so when I say systematically and slowly, you're going in to make sure that you never target civilians, but you do get to the different positions that are built into apartment buildings, into mosques, into schools, into kindergartens. So you need the forces on the ground to do that. You need a large portion of forces. To be able to detect the shafts that go into that subterranean arena, you have to have forces on the ground. It's a combination of special forces together with the different types of infantry, of engineering corps that can go in and blow up those tunnels. And all of this, Fareed, where we all know that there's the challenge that the hostages themselves most likely held mainly inside the tunnels. So you have to do everything systematically and slowly. I know it seems like we're doing it from the air. It's actually very much on the ground. We were still on the ground in this week of the pause, which was done to get out our hostages as much as possible. But it's taking it systematically and slowly, save the civilian lives. We need to do so, not just for us. It's the right thing to do, but because at the end of the day, the civilians in the Gaza Strip deserve a much better future than one where Hamas rules.
The reason I think many people think it's been a war mainly from the air is by the IDF's own numbers. The number of bombs it has dropped in northern Gaza far exceeds, in 45 or 50 days, far exceeds what the U.S. dropped in Afghanistan over 4 or 5 years. So when you look at southern Gaza, I'm wondering, you've already moved 1 million people into that area. So now it's twice as densely populated as it was. How will you manage this balance? Is there a different, more precise, more targeted approach? Or is it going to be a replay of what we saw over the last 45 days?
The biggest challenge in that sense is the way that the terrorists themselves over 16 years embedded themselves and built themselves all of these different positions within the urban area underneath it in that subterranean arena. So when we look towards the south, and you're absolutely right, it's a way larger amount of people, as we told the people to go from the north to the south, and we have been doing that again now, Fareed. We've been telling people in the area of Khan Yunis specifically where to go to save their lives. Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it pretty. How do you actually change in that sense? You do it carefully with as much information as you have. The information is not from the air per se. You need to go in and to start it. I don't think in that sense that my biggest challenge for me as an Israeli is that I can't, as an Israeli, leave the Hamas there in any way. What they built there over 16 years is something that threatens our existence, in the fact that if this type of terror organization can do so embedded in the population, this is a threat for the entire Middle East. So we will go in, we will try to be as exact as possible. And I say it not just for myself, for my kids who are the ones who need to do that kind of targeting. We're talking about Israeli soldiers who have to make these decisions. You never target civilians, but the entire Gazan arena is urban warfare, and that's the biggest challenge there is. Slow, systematic, careful.
Miri, thank you so much. That gives us a much, much better sense of what is going on.